What are some things that could happen this year that would just be pretty chaotic, that really throw a wrench in the blender, as Meemaw would say? I've got one. You remember the SEC last year, how there was a lot of teams that were pretty good, but no one was really elite? And that bore itself out in the playoff. You remember that? What if that's the Big Ten this year? The Big Ten's been really good about separation at the top. They've been really good about, by season's end, there's a clear tier 1, and then there's a pretty big gap between whatever, like tier 3. Sometimes there is no tier 2. Well, that wasn't the SEC last year. Last year, the SEC, by the end of the regular season, had 6 teams with 2 or 3 losses by the end of the regular season. And no one really stood out. And then the Big Ten had 4 teams that were 10-2 or better, and then there was a big gap. And Illinois was kind of in the gap, but there was a big gap. What if the Big Ten looks more like the SEC this year? Now, here's why that could be chaotic. It could be that you just don't have a team that emerges and you don't make it to the national title game. But imagine this group. Think about the group of teams I'm about to read you. Ohio State and Oregon and Penn State, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, Nebraska, USC, Washington. Those teams all have win totals of somewhere between 7.5 and 10.5. Now, you would think that 2 or 3 of them are going to elevate at the expense of the others, right? That's the modus operandi of the Big Ten. What if they don't? What if they all just compress? And it's a bunch of 9-3, maybe some 2-loss teams scattered in there. And then you get to playoff selection time, and the SEC had 2 or 3 teams just totally elevate, like the Big Ten did last year. And what if maybe the ACC has a couple of teams elevate? What if the Big 12 championship game is an undefeated versus a 1-loss, and the 1-loss wins it to where it's pretty clear both of them are going to go to the playoff? What if Notre Dame's plenty good enough to make the playoff? Well, what you could have is you could have your version of Bama, South Carolina, and Ole Miss on the outside looking in, only it could be Penn State and Oregon and Michigan on the outside looking in or something like that. Now, is that chaotic? Well, it depends on who you're a fan of, but I'll tell you what it really would hurt. It would hurt the Big Ten's argument they're making right now. Tony Petitti's out there making the argument that we want the AQ structure. We want the AQ model where we're guaranteed 4 teams per year. It'd be a bad look in the middle of making that argument if you couldn't get 4 teams in the playoff this year.